While the trends of current times have the watch manufacturers producing integrated bracelet watches with angular looks and profiles to match the concept of luxury steel watches as introduced in 70s, Tudor had something else in their mind with their latest release. Where other brands have sports watches with bold profiles to make something eye-catchy that although doesn't look like a rip-off of Royal Oak or Nautilus, yet takes the design cues and the inspiration, Tudor released their own version of integrated bracelet watch that although has the bells and whistles for a luxury steel watch, yet offers a vintage vibe of watches from the past, precisely from 70s. This is interesting because although Tudor Royal is not a re-edition of any past model, nor it's paying homage to basically any other watch, yet it's a watch with inspiration from the past and a product with a vibe that offers a combination of experience you get from Rolex Datejust with fluted bezel and Jubilee bracelet, AP Royal Oak, Rolex Oyster Quartz, and also Tudor Oyster Prince Day. The name, although may look to be inspired from Royal Oak, it is actually a revival of Tudor Royal from 1950s. There are many design elements that Tudor have offered in this watch that make it vintage inspired, yet in modern form and finish. And two of them are present in this very watch in the review today. First one being two-tone configuration, which when added to integrated bracelet design here, adds a touch of contrast to the experience, with steel and gold playing their own tones, colors and hues. The second element to make it vintage inspired in this very model is the Roman numerals that also link this watch back to watches from the past, especially when you combine it with the rest of design, proportions, case angles and corners. The two-tone configuration in this model is indeed executed very well, with the bracelet having interconnecting links in gold and center and side links are made of steel. Now while the interconnecting links look to be of gold, they are not full solid gold. Rather they are made of steel internally but capped with 18 karat yellow gold on top, which is intelligent way of how Tudor have managed to achieve the looks yet without impacting the cost of the watch. A more interesting character here is the bezel, which surprisingly doesn't come capped on steel. Rather, it's a full 18 karat solid yellow gold. And in result, the way the bezel plays with the light and reflections indeed adds character to the watch. The notched bezel in 18 karat gold comes with interesting finish, and there's alternating cut grooves and polished surface with smooth finish. The bezel design and machining is basically a third character that adds vintage vibe to the watch. While it does look beautiful, bezel being made of gold means that it can be very easily dented or dinged upon a hit or drop, because gold is a much softer metal than steel, hence the lesser versatility. The model in this video is a 41mm reference, and accordingly you can see that it's not just the time and date only watch, rather there's a day on display too. So if you wanted a watch with day, this 41mm is fortunately or unfortunately your only option. The dial here is black, and while it does have matte-like texture, it is actually sunburst in its finish, so expect to see the dial reflecting the light, which is normally not very common with black dials. The Roman numerals on the dial come applied and have a three-dimensional depth to them, which I personally like about this watch, and then they come with polished finish, which to me complements the watch design very well. The hour markers 11, 12 and 1 are cut out to make way for day, which I am personally not a big fan of, and I wish Tudor had simply left out these markers altogether rather than cutting them out, because it simply ruins the symmetry of the dial. Similar is the case with hour marker for 3 o'clock, which is cut out to make way for date window. This marker at 3 o'clock actually looks better than it does on 38mm reference, as I showed in my video as per link above. So overall, I think the date execution is actually not too bad at all. To picture the size of the watch The size of bezel measured at the outer extremity is 40.93mm, so it is a true 41mm size watch. The size of dial or crystal on top is 33.81mm, so the face of watch is big. And I personally think that due to dial size being relatively bigger, although it wears like a 41mm watch, it looks like a 42mm watch from third person's perspective. The horizontal span of the watch with crown included is 43.43mm. The watch lug to lug is 47.73mm. So despite larger size, it is wearable. Also, the bracelet does not flare out any further, so the watch span does not extend past this point. The width of the bracelet where it connects to the case is 25.55mm, which is about 2mm wider than that of 38mm reference. The bracelet tapers down quite steeply, and at the clasp it is much narrower at 15.89mm. If you include the width of clasp too, it is 17.95mm. The weight of the watch adjusted to 6.5 inches wrist is 148 grams, which is relatively light when you remember that it has gold on it and it is a 41mm case watch, so I personally don't think you will find it heavy or uncomfortable on the wrist. The watch case comes with case sides that are fully polished. There's no bevels or chamfers at the sides of the case, but it looks fine overall. The top surface of the case are fully brushed and the brushed lines are nicely defined. The other side of the case is again polished and the quality of finish is also very good for its price. The quality of brushing on the case and the bracelet is also very consistent, which checks out another box for integrated bracelet watch. Nicely done. The interconnecting links capped with gold are polished, and that adds a nice contrast to overall looks of the watch. The watch comes with closed case back to house inside third-party Sellita movement. Now this is a letdown with Tudor not using their own in-house caliber, but this is understandable when you consider the price of this watch. And while I would have personally preferred to see an in-house movement, credit where credit is due. This third-party movement is fairly decent with accuracy. I ran this watch for 24 hours and changed its position multiple times during test period. And after 24 hours of observation time, the watch gained only 3.5 seconds, which is indeed very impressive accuracy for its price and specs. What Tudor has achieved from this Sellita movement doesn't stop there, and there's more to impress. Unwinding the crown to position 1 will allow you to wind the movement. Pulling the crown one step back to position 2 and turning the crown clockwise will allow you to quickly set the date. What's more interesting here is that when you turn the crown anti-clockwise now, you have the ability to set the day instantaneously, which is indeed very impressive. Now if you turn it clockwise back again, the date changes back again. Very well played indeed. Pulling the crown one more step back to position 3 will hack the seconds hand, and you have the ability to set the time accurately with synchronized seconds. What's even more interesting is that while there are watches many times price of Tudor Royal that change the date slowly at midnight, the attention to detail here is another level, and we have both the day and the date changing instantly right at the midnight. Indeed very well executed by Tudor, and I personally consider this as a big win for Tudor. Putting the watch in the dark, there's unfortunately not much lume to mesmerize. You can technically read time, so it is somewhat functional, but it's definitely not the best lume to be seen at this price point. Leaving the watch in the dark for another 10 minutes left the hands with still some lume, enough to allow time reading. Under the macro, this watch is no different from what I saw in 38mm reference, and aside from some superficial scratches, the quality of polish is indeed impressive. The sides and corners of our hand are nicely cut with no high spots or burrs on side. The minute hand makes no difference, and the finish and workmanship are on display. Even the seconds hand comes with details, and there's not even dust or smudge marks on side. The hour markers are the same quality finish and polish as I saw on 38mm reference, and there's simply not a mark or speck on side, which is impressive. The quality of text for Tudor is also very crisp, with no flaws to report. The quality of text for day is also fine, and the text itself is also centered, which is indeed a breath of fresh air. The dial is sunburst, as I mentioned before, and the lines are clearly defined. You can also see how the dial changes its shade of black and plays with the light, thanks to its sun ray treatment. On the wrist, the 41mm Tudor Royal has a wrist presence that is hard to miss. The watch dial of close to 34mm means that it looks much bigger on the wrist, but then the case, which is true 41mm, and a very manageable lug-to-lug of 47.7mm means that it is still wearable. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and wristband is 55mm, and although it is on a bigger size for a watch, it looks just about right. The watch case thickness is 10.62mm, which is the same as 38mm reference, but possibly due to its larger size, it feels thicker on the wrist, although it isn't. Before measuring it with my caliber, I actually thought it was about 1 to 2mm thicker due to its substance on the wrist, but after I measured it, I confirmed that it is actually not thicker than the 38mm reference. The bracelet is wide at close to 26mm, and it tapers down quite a lot to under 16mm. But I personally think it would have looked more balanced for bracelet to taper down to around 17 or 18mm rather than to 15.8mm, because it is relatively a bigger watch and a wider bracelet at clasp might have made more sense. The clasp I personally think is the weakest point in this watch. It does come with safety lock, and by definition, the purpose of flip lock is to prevent accidental release. But I can still open the clasp without ever having to open the flip lock, which to me simply suggests inadequate hold of the clasp. I don't know whether it's the ball bearings that are not providing enough hold, or it's just a poor clasp design with flip lock simply sitting between the links and not as such on the clasp area. But I do think it will open inadvertently in accidental events, hits or drops. Is it so loose that it will open inadvertently during your normal wrist wear? I don't think it will initially, but after some wear and tear, it probably will. Tudor Royal 41mm is an interesting watch with a vibe and looks as if it's a re-edition of watch from the past. But when you dig down further, although it does have name from Tudor Royal from 50s, it is actually an all-new release from the manufacturer. The idea behind this was simple and solid: to offer a watch with integrated bracelet design and vibe from the past, but without taking away the aspects of looks and affordability. While it does not have in-house movement, Tudor have gone to the extent of offering instant date and day change, and then also the accuracy is simply spot on. There's also a factor of luxury, especially if you go with two-tone configuration, and the 18-karat yellow gold bezel has a character of its own. For the price it comes in, if you want a watch with integrated bracelet design, day and date function, two-tone configuration and impressive workmanship, you really have nothing in the market but Tudor Royal.